Hi everyone, in this video we are going to learn how to use Excel to find approximations for a solution of an initial value problem. We are going to use the Euler's method, so let's start by reviewing it. Let's consider an initial value problem. Y prime equals f of xy and y at x sub 0 equals y sub 0. First thing that we need to note is that our derivative y prime should be by itself on one side, so whatever else is on the other side will be labeled with the function f of xy. Then the Euler's method for approximating further values of function y, let's denote them with y sub 1, y sub 2, etc., is the following. We will have to calculate the further values of x by adding previous value of x plus h. So if you will take a look at our notation, we have x sub I plus 1 equals x sub I plus h. Then the approximation for the solution y will be y sub I plus 1 equals y sub I, so the previous y value plus the same quantity h multiplied by function f, the same function we have on the right side right here, evaluated at the previous x value x sub I and the previous y value y sub I. Let's consider the following example. It says find y of 1 using the Euler's method with h equals 0.1, 0.05, and 0.025 for the following initial value problem. Y prime equals negative 2y squared plus xy plus x squared, and y of 0 equals 1. That means that x sub 0 in our problem is equal to 0, y sub 0 is equal to 1, and the function f of xy equals negative 2y squared plus xy plus x squared. Let's note that in this problem the derivative was by itself right away, but if it is not, then you will have to do additional work of isolating it. Next, I'm going to open a blank Excel workbook and enter the given information. We were given that x sub 0 was equal to 0, y sub 0 was equal to 1, and the first value of h that I'm required to use was 0.1. I'm actually not going to use these values in my calculations, but I just entered it so I can have them right in front of me. Then I'm going to fill out a table of values for I, our subscript, x sub I, and y sub I. The very first subscript was 0, x sub 0 was 0, and y sub 0 was 1. Next step will be the following. Instead of manually typing in all the needed values of I am going to use a formula in Excel. In order to do so, click on the desired cell. I want them to enter in this column. Then start your formula by typing in the equals sign. And to get the next value of I need to take the previous I value, so you can just click on that cell. It will use its cell reference B9 and add 1 to it, since our next subscript is 1. So the Excel will do calculations for us. Once again, you can see the formula in this command box right here. After that, you don't actually have to type in a new formula. What you can do is point your mouse on this cell, in particular on the bottom right corner, until your mouse turns into a little black cross. Click on it and hold it and drag it down. And what Excel does for you, it creates the next formula with the previous cell. So if your first formula used B9, this one, as you can see in our formula box, uses B10. If you click on the next one, it uses B11, etc. So once again, I dragged it down by making this a little black cross and got up to I equals 10. Next step, we'll be calculating the values of x in the column x sub I. So once again, I'm going to use the Excel formula, and let's review what was the formula for calculating the next x value. Going back to the Euler's method, we had x sub I plus 1, so the next x value equals the previous x value plus h. So going back, click on the desired column, start the Excel formula by typing equals. Then we need to use the previous x value, just click on that value. The Excel will use the cell reference C sub 9 plus, and we need to add the value of h. I am not going to use this because this will require anchors or dollar signs, so if you're not familiar with that, just retype 0.1. It calculates our next x value, 0.1. Then click on that cell, point to the bottom right corner, click on it, hold it, and drag it down until you get x equals 1. If you remember in our question, we had to find y of 1, so x must go as far as 1. Lastly, we have to fill out the y sub I column. So let's go back to the Euler's method and review the formula. So the formula was y sub I plus 1 equals y sub I, so the previous y value, plus h multiplied by function f at x sub I, y sub I, so previous x and previous y. Now let's review the function f of xy. The function f of xy was negative 2y squared plus xy plus x squared. And once again, we'll have to use the previous y value and the previous x value when we calculate that function. So let's go back to our Excel file and let's start filling out the y column. So click on the desired cell, start by typing in equal sign. Then we need the previous y value. The cell reference was D9 plus the value of h, 0.1. Once again, if you're not familiar with the dollar signs, make sure to just retype 0.1. Otherwise, when you will drag down your formula, it will start using those empty cells, and this is not what we want. Multiplied by, make sure to actually use the multiplication symbols in Excel, otherwise it may have some troubles. Then the function f of xy had multiple terms, so let's use parentheses, and the first one was negative 2 multiplied, again make sure to use the multiplication symbol, by the previous y value squared. So once again, to be safe, I'm going to enter that y value in parentheses, click on the cell reference, close parentheses, squared. Plus, we had the previous x value times the previous y value. So that will be this cell, C9, times the previous y value, D9. Plus, we had the previous x value squared. So again, to be safe, put in parentheses, click on the cell reference, C9, close parentheses, squared. And don't forget to close parentheses for the function. And click enter. We have an approximation for the y value at x equals 0.1. Again, you can review your formula by clicking back on this cell, and you have your formula up here in the formula box, and if you have something wrong, you can always make changes to that formula. Then if you're happy with the formula, go back to the cell, point on the bottom right corner, click, hold, and drag it down. It does all the work for us, and here is the approximation. Here is the approximation for the y value at x equals 1 when h is 0.1. Next, let me do very similar work to calculating y value when h equals 0.05. So first of all, if that is your step on the x-axis, you will need your subscript up to I equals 20. So what you can do is click on I equals 10 cell, point to the bottom right corner and drag it down until you get I equals 20. Then to calculate the x value, let's enter a formula equals the previous x value, I'm using cell reference C9, plus the h value 0.05. Then click back on that cell, point to the bottom right corner until it becomes little black cross, click, hold, and drag it down. Drag it down until you get x equals 1, right here. And finally, we need to fill out the y column. So we have equals, then the previous y value, plus the value of h, 0.05, times function f of xy, so I'm going to enter that function in parentheses, and the function was -2 times the previous y value squared, so cell reference is D9, I will enter it in parentheses, otherwise Excel may say something, squared, plus previous x multiplied by the previous y, plus previous x value squared. So again, I will enter it in parentheses. And don't forget to close parentheses for the function. Click enter. This is the approximation for the y value at x equals 0.05. Then again, click on that cell, point to the bottom right, drag it until x equals 1. And here is your approximation for the y value when we're using smaller steps on the x-axis, which means it should be a better approximation than our previous one.